Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm being told you can't see the project. Sorry about that. Okay, let me reshare my screen again. I don't know what happened. So let me reshare. I'm sorry about that. I didn't see. Okay. Sorry, I'll repeat. Okay, so let me share my entire. I hope the screen is now visible. Can you see my terminal? And just say it on the chat. Let me confirm. I don't know where I left you, but I don't know whether you saw me running the npx create React up in VS Code. But so up to here, I just ran the command npx create void at latest first React, and then gave the command for the template React as instructed on the web on our platform, and then I followed through. I picked the linter to be ESLint. The linter is what now screams or highlights with the red whenever you make a mistake, and then I when requested to choose whether npm to run npm and start now, I selected yes, that automatically runs the application. And then later it installed the dependencies and added these packages, and it had now 31 packages. And then I just terminated the server and navigated to my application using the cd command. So cd first react, the one that we created this, giving it this name. I mean, it's okay. Okay. So let's just begin the entire presentation because my screen was not being visible. So we'll just begin from the start, running the commands and everything. Okay. So we said that whenever you want to create this React, you'll okay. Don't know whether I should start from the beginning. So introducing React. We said that React is a JavaScript library used for building interactive user interfaces, especially single page applications. That is pages that update without full page reload. Said that React compares every time data changes in your application. React compares the state and checks for only parts that have changed and only updates that. And we said we use React because it gives us a faster user interface update. And then that is React only updates the part of the code that changes, of the page that changes, and it is also component based. We'll talk about these components as we proceed. We'll see what they are, but we said we have two types of components. That is, we have functional components and class components, but we'll talk about them. And we said that React is also great for single page applications. That is where component changes dynamically, and key ideas that we need to discuss are components which are reusable, composable user interface pieces, that is functional or classes, but we'll majorly focus on functional. We'll talk about JSX, which is a combination of JavaScript and XML like syntax to describe user interfaces. We'll talk about one-way data flow, that is props, and that is how we pass data from a parent component, which will also introduce the concept of hierarchy. And we'll talk about where state lives inside a component. We'll look at hooks, which are also functional components, and we'll talk about use state, user effect, use reducer, and use context, which will come in later. So also, we said for this React, you'll need the node, which is npm packet manager, and you can download that from the node official webpage. So you just look for node.js install, and now choose the installer depending on your platform, the machine you're using. Could be a Windows, could be a Mac, or could be on Linux. And then select these. For Linux, they only have the binary. For Mac, they have these installer, so select the installer, and for Windows, also pick the installer. And when it installs, you can check for the version or checking whether it has installed by opening your terminal. Just type cmd on your search bar and then open the command prompt. So, okay, let me add a new window. Then in these, you can type node version to check whether it has installed, and also npm, but you only need to install the node. It comes with npm and npx. So you've seen I don't need to go through this process because I already have them installed. Okay, and then that's installation, and now we come to creating our first React project, and we look at the setup. So we are going to use this Vite, which also is installed when you install the node, and we're going to run this command and look at the scaffold that this Vite gives us. So we navigate to the folder you want to create your project. I'm going to create these in the KamandeDevHub materials, and yeah, so let me first delete these I had created to avoid conflict. Then on the search bar at the top, I just write cmd to open it in the command prompt. And now inside this folder, I'll run the command npx create Vite at latest. That is, it will use the latest version of Vite. Let's call it our first React. And given the argument for template, we'll use React. Then we hit enter. So it will scaffold, and users ask us a few questions. For the linter, let's use the yes lint, which is easier to work with. And then install with npm and start, we just pick yes. And then it will start creating the project and scaffold an app for us, which will run automatically. Good. Let's wait for it to finish. So as it writes, we can discuss what JSX is. And we say that JSX is a syntax extension for JavaScript designed to make writing user interface code in React easier and more expressive. That is, we have two types of programming. We have declarative. Let me show a slide on that. We have declarative. Yeah, we have declarative and imperative. That is the two types of programmings that we have. And Reacts now help us to write in a declarative way. So for imperative code, we manually create and remove elements the way we were creating using the in HTML the way, or in JavaScript the way we were creating an element using the document.createElement. And then that is where we manually created or removed the element, and then we manually managed event listeners. That is, we are attaching event listeners to a component we wanted to use, and we manually updated the DOM when data changed. So for React, it helps us to write code declaratively. That is, we describe what the user interface should look like, and React listens for changes, and React updates the DOM for you automatically. So React takes care of these things. That is assembling the component to render in the user interface. See this. So when you use React, the library handles all of this so that you can focus on describing the user interface. It also listens for user events that include clicking, typing, or hover, and then it updates the state whenever events happen, and automatically re-renders when the state changes. So we look at components. Okay, let's first return to this. It ran the command and then created this. And when we open this, when we open the URL that we are given there, this is the template it renders. These are just the boilerplates given by the Vite. We'll look at that, and it has a counter which increments each time you click, but we're not going to dwell onto that much. So let me describe a few things here. So a component is a reusable piece of user interface. That is a JavaScript function that returns JSX. We've said JSX allows us to write code in HTML like structure. And we have different methods of writing now these components because they are functions, and we have different functions in HTML. We have the normal way we declare a function. We can use assigning a variable to a function, and that is, we have function declaration and then function expression. That is assigning a variable to a function, and then we have an arrow function here. So all those components are valid. And before I also proceed, there are different rules that we use for writing components. And so we have the type, which is required, and our name must be capitalized. So the first letter of the component must be capitalized, and then we'll have it must return a single root element that is wrapped inside our siblings. We have this fragment, we'll talk about it. We have also, it is required that it must be a pure function. That is, the same input always produces the same output. And so you do not directly mutate props. We'll talk about props and state. And one best practice is to use the Pascal case when naming them instead of using the camel case that we have. So for example, if the name is a product list, or just the to-do that we have here, so you just call it the product list like that, and not these product lists. And also another best practice is that one component is required per file. So let's first look at the structure of this. So I'll start up the server using that, and then we created this first React, so navigate to it. I'm in the folder where I created it, so I do a cd first React, and then in that I type code space and then with the period, the full stop, and it opens in VS Code. And we said, sorry, also we said the app scaffold gives us a different a structure already. So in the structure we have the node modules, which we said are these are the codes for the all dependencies that we'll use, and you don't need to know anything about these, or you don't need to mind about them much. We have a public folder which we said holds images or any other static forms, could include videos. And then we have the SRC folder, which is the main folder that we will be working on. And the SRC folder has different folders and files. It has the assets where we will be placing our static files, let's say images, videos, or even icons or logos that we'll be using in our app. Then we have app.css, which is our main styling app. We have app.jsx, which is our main entry point or our parent component. We have index.css and index.html, also index.css for styling. We have index.html, which is our main or our entry point to our application. And you can see it has this div with the ID. So this is where all our component will be mounted whenever we update this app or create other components that we will be importing in our app file. So they will be this is the main entry point to our application. So it has the div with the root, and it uses the main.jsx here, which before React is rendered on the browser, it first needs to be recompiled into JavaScript, and that's what React mainly handles. We have compilers. We don't need to look much into that. And in the main.jsx, we'll talk about component and how we use them. You'll see, you've seen these terms, the document.getElement by ID, when we are manipulating the DOM directly. So React handles this, and like it kind of compiles all our project because we will be importing everything into main, and now converts it into JavaScript, a language that the browser can understand. So those are the key files you needed to know in what was scaffolded by npx create React app. And now we have this package.json, which is a file that holds information about our application and the dependencies that we have. I just think of it as a recipe because we'll talk about deployment and we'll see what happens in the commands that we run. Yeah, so that's our folder or the skeleton that is generated. So first, let's clean it, and I'll introduce the concepts as we proceed. So I clean the app.jsx, and then I clean the app.css. Sorry, because we'll be applying styling into them. So let's move into our app. This file. Let's import our CSS, but we'll not be using it. When I was starting HTML, I talked about this CSS. We talked about paths or URLs. We talked about absolute paths. We'll see them and how we import or use files declared in another file and how to access its components. So, and we've said we'll talk about functional components. So for here, we declare our function app just using the normal function. The normal way, and then that. And remember that whenever you create a component, you'll have to export it. So, and we've said every file should export one component. So here we will export default app, and we've said JSX allows us to return HTML like code. So this is an example of a JSX. Each function should have a return keyword, and then that we've said each JSX should be returned in a parent element, and we'll be majorly using the fragment instead of using a div or section. And for example, here I want to render a h1, and this will be welcome to React. This is my first cohort, so 2026, and can render also another p. So we're learning it, learning components today. And so when I save this file, let me save this also, and let me open the terminal. You can access it at the top of VS Code. So let me open a new terminal. Okay, let me see whether there are comments. Okay, this was the one that was first generated. Let me close that. And so you run it using npm run dev. This is the command to run our React, and it opens in this URL. So I'm going to copy it and open it in a browser. So I love using Chrome. So let me just open it in Chrome. Okay, so let me paste it there and open. So you've seen it has rendered our HTML-like structure, but this is JavaScript code. And sorry, I forgot to mention, but you will be seeing as we'll be creating more and more components or more and more code that we save our files that return any frontend or JSX-like structure using the JSX extension. But ones that don't return any frontend components, we'll be naming them with just the JS extension. Yeah, so you've seen it renders this. And one thing about React is that as you saw when we were creating elements in pure HTML, we had to refresh the page each and every time. So here, whenever you save, the changes will be reflecting. So I hope you are enjoying. So whenever you change, it reflects and renders immediately. So that is what happens each and every time for React. And if you run into an error, it will just display the error. Yeah, so that's a simple thing about JSX, or maybe we could create another one. So we could have said, let's say we have tasks, and let's say an array of tasks. Go to the market, and then the one, let's say make supper or make lunch, etc. Okay, and yeah, so maybe do a project, etc. And so I could render this using a URL maybe, but we'll discuss about this more. And I could do the tasks dot map, Okay, we access JavaScript variables using the curly braces. So I could do the tasks dot map. Okay, and then maybe return a task with an arrow function as an argument, and we are returning a list, and this list should have key. Okay, sorry, so we have, okay, let me do this. So we have a tasks with map, then we have a key and a task, and so we are returning a list with the key. Okay, we have the index, sorry, not the key. Index, so the key will be the index. We'll talk about this. And we are displaying the task. So we also access it using the curly braces. Task. Okay, so let's see. Good, it's not rendering. Let's see the issue. Okay. We'll see why that did not render, which is a good thing. We'll look at that and see why it did not render. But let me talk about something else first. Before that, and if you remember, we said that some of these React, no, some of these array methods return some new array or some new elements. So we'll see why that one did not render, and I'll talk about something else. I don't know whether I'll be able to cover what I had intended to cover today, but I wanted to touch something small on that was JSX, which helped us now return HTML-like code. We'll be seeing that a lot as we proceed. And before that, I wanted to talk about these now components and props. So we've said that components are building blocks of a React application because we'll divide our projects in different components depending on, let's say, the pages we have, or we could have some reusable components that appear in each and every page. Let's say, for example, this navbar in this KamandeDevHub platform, or this sidebar, and also the footer. You can see these are components that appear in almost, not like appear actually in all our pages. So we have reusable components and just other components. Excuse. So let me introduce now these components, and you say they are building blocks, and each component is like a mini function that returns a piece of user interface. We'll be looking into that, and these are a few characteristics of components. So they are reusable. You can use the same component in multiple places. They are composable, so you can nest components inside each other to build components, complex user interfaces. And we've said we have functional or class components, and so we say that in most React app we use functional components. Let me mention something small on props. So props are like function arguments for a component. We'll talk about that and how to pass props. And So they let us pass data from one component to another component, and they have a few important traits, which are they are read only, and this is you can just so you can't change props inside the child, so the child just reads it. And then you can pass functions as props to handle events. We'll talk about how we update these props and how a child component can communicate with a parent component. Okay, so we have an example here of a functional component with props. So we've said these props are like arguments to a function. So for example, we have these functional components which exports default function card, which has a prop for title, and children. We'll see what these children returns. Okay, so we had our this one. Let's just say let's just return. And let me just remove this first, and so it just return a h1 that just says our first React app. This is just a simple one to explain the issue of components. So, and let's say I could create a function here. So let's say we are displaying some to-dos. So we could do a to-do list, a to-do list.jsx. This is just an example, but when we'll be doing a project for this React series, we'll be scaling our e-commerce platform from pure JavaScript into using React. So this will declare a function to-do list, and we'll pass in props for to-dos. Only let's just pass that one first, and we export these default to-do list. So inside our to-do list, we'll be returning a list of to-dos. So we'll be returning a list of to-dos, and we'll use a URL, and inside this we'll map through the to-dos. So to-dos.map. Okay, we are mapping through that each to-do, and so we'll be returning a to-do, and in this we'll return a URL, no, a list, and that one, and we'll be returning the to-do.title, and so the key will be the to-do.id. I will define a to-do with an ID. Good. So that's our to-do list, and for us to use it, we will import it here. So we'll import to-do list. So when you highlight that, it will be imported with the correct path. So you don't need to remember how to call a path or to access a component you created, and then so to use it here we'll return it. We've imported it, and then first let's declare to-dos. So we can declare them inside here. So const to-dos will be yeah, it will be an array with different objects. So one the object will have an ID. It will be ID1, and then a title, So the title will be go to the market. Good. We can add a field for maybe is completed, and we can give it a default value of false. We can have another to do. Let me copy this and then just be pasting them and change the titles. Have like 2. Good. So that one is go to the market. This one is go to school or do assignment. And here you practice coding. Practice coding. Like that. And then so to use our one could be change the title to do. To do's. So to use our to-do component or to-do list, we'll import it at the top and then use it using this now to-do list. And then to pass in the prompts, we'll have to-dos. We're passing in the prompt for to-dos here because it's the one that we are taking. Could name this to-do list. To-do lists to easily differentiate the two. And then for the prop, we'll pass in the value that like this. Our to-dos will be equals to the to-do lists, and we close in like that. So you declare a functional component, and then you import it in your app.jsx, and you pass in the props. So you can see our to-dos are being rendered in the browser. We have, and we said that this now updates automatically. So that is a component. We'll be looking at more components because we'll be creating our e-commerce platform. We'll have like the to-do list, we'll have the product list, we'll have the product component, we'll have the cart component, and many more components. We'll have the footer, the header, etc. So I just wanted to illustrate a simple React component and how we do it. And before I conclude this today's class, you will allow me to introduce another concept briefly. That is a concept on state, and talk about state or why we do not update data or state in React dynamically or by mutating it. And I'll explain that using a different example. So let me open the KamandeDevHub again. So we've introduced a component and given an example. You can go through the example in the platform. I like using dynamic examples so that when you are revisiting them, you can understand. So I'll introduce this concept of state, and then in our next classes, we'll look at event handlers, control inputs, and everything else, and how to render list keys, but you've already seen that. And we'll talk about conditional rendering and everything, talk about use effect, but let's talk about the state and the use state function. So we say use state returns a value. That is, we'll see how we set the state. So we have a value and then the updater function. This is the syntax we use for state. And then so we normally use functional updates. We'll see how we do that when we need a state to change. But before that, let me show why or explain a little why we maybe need these, why we need this state. So, okay, let me comment that to illustrate this, and also comment this also. So let's say, for example, we had a we had a component here. So let's say let message is equals to welcome to today's class. So that is our message, and we need to be displaying our message each and every time. So after that, we can display the message in a paragraph. We said we access them using the curly braces, and we display the message like that. And when we run that, we see it's displaying the message. But let's say this is just an example, and let's say the message changes, and I'm just going to illustrate this using a normal update. So let's say we are going to use the can we illustrate using C, and we see how, because when we update the changes manually, these will not reflect in our user interface. So use not set interval, so we can use the set timeout method to illustrate this, and we'll be updating our message like this. And so we'll say message will be equal to we will be learning React in depth. And this one now, let's console log the message. Okay, console.log the message. There we go. And this now updates after every 3 seconds. That will be 3000 milliseconds. And when we run that, you see our message is displaying, and I will show the console, and I will restart. So we have our message. Observe this one. You see these will be learning React in depth displays after 3 seconds, but our message is not being updated. We'll return just the welcome to today's class, and this runs after every 2 milliseconds. So when we update changes locally, they won't reflect in our user interface. And so to solve this problem, React introduced the use state hook. We'll talk about hooks, and we'll talk about the different hooks that exist. But for now, we're going to discuss these states with the use state. And we've said that state is data that we're trying to display, because look at scenarios where we are fetching data from the database. We need to update each and every time. So for example, how we could have handled this, we could use these instead of that, we can have the const message, that is the value, and the updater function. So set message is equals, but we need to first import the use state. Let's import it at the top level. So import use state from React, and then to use it, so we can say const message is equals user state, and we could have our message that we had. So we had we are learning. This one was welcome to today's class. Okay, and so we can still use our set timeout function to see the updated. So set timeout, then we pass that with the arrow function, and we'll set the message to we will be learning React in depth. Good. So let's do that, and let's type this after our 3 milliseconds. And let's see, open our browser. Okay, we got the changes updating after 3 milliseconds. So welcome to today's class, and then after the elapse, we'll be running learning React in depth. Look at this and how we use this user state and the state of data, because in this React or in this frontend, we'll be working with dynamic data, and we need to be updating the user interface whenever data changes. And we'll also see how we fetch data. We'll look at the others. So allow me to end the class at that, and tomorrow we'll proceed with more. Not tomorrow, sorry. On Wednesday, we'll proceed with more concepts, but keep looking the channel, as I'll be uploading more content on React and JavaScript. So just to make your understanding easier. So bye bye and have an amazing time. I hope you enjoyed the lesson.